Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. His hand clamped over my mouth before I could scream, dragging me backward into the suffocating dark with a violence that promised ruin. The heavy oak door clicked shut, severing the sliver of light from the hallway and sealing us in a blackness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. My back hit the cold steel of shelving units, the metal digging into my spine, but the body pressing against my front was scorching hot, a wall of solid muscle and expensive cologne that I would recognize in hell. Make a sound. A voice hissed against the shell of my ear, low and vibrating with a terrifying mix of adrenaline and malice, and I'll ruin you right here, Vane. Faster than the security team outside ever could. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was Silas Thorne. Of course, it was Silas. Even in the midst of a campus-wide lockdown, with sirens wailing in the distance and the threat of an intruder stalking the halls of St. Jude's Academy, my personal demon had found me. Let go, I tried to say, but his palm was a leather vice against my lips. I could only make a muffled protest, my hands gripping his wrists, trying to pry him off. He didn't budge. Instead, he leaned in, his weight pinning me further into the cramped archive space. It was a janitorial closet repurposed for old files, barely big enough for one person, let alone two grown men with a history of blood and hatred between them. Quiet, he commanded again, removing his hand slowly but keeping his forearm braced against the shelf next to my head, effectively caging me. Unless you want the person with the gun 3 doors down to hear us. The air in the closet was stale, smelling of old paper, dust, and the sharp, metallic tang of Silas's fear. Or was it anger? With Silas, the heir to the Thorne shipping empire and the undisputed king of the university's social hierarchy, it was impossible to tell. He operated on a spectrum of cruelty that ranged from cold indifference to scorching sadism. And for 3 years, I, Julian Vane, the charity case on a scholarship, had been his favorite target. Why me? I whispered, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to remain stoic. My eyes were adjusting to the gloom. I could see the outline of his jaw, sharp and tense, and the glint of his eyes watching me. There were empty classrooms. The library. Why did you drag me in here? Because you were standing in the middle of the hallway like a deer in headlights, you idiot, Silas snapped, though he kept his voice to a whisper. And because this room is soundproofed. It used to be the listening room for the music department before the renovations. You saved me. The words felt like ash in my mouth. Silas let out a scoff, a harsh sound in the tight space. Don't flatter yourself. If you die, the police investigation shuts down the campus for weeks. My father is in the middle of a merger. He can't afford the bad press of a dead scholarship student on the family-endowed wing. Cruelty. It was always his shield. But something didn't add up. To drag me here, he had to cross the open atrium, exposed to the very threat he claimed to be avoiding. He had risked his life to pull me into the shadows. You're lying. I breathed, emboldened by the adrenaline coursing through my veins. You crossed the atrium. I saw you running from the West Wing. You came back for me. Silas stiffened. The space between us was non-existent. I could feel the rise and fall of his chest against mine, the heat of his thighs bracketing my legs. I hate you, Julian, he said, the statement sounding less like an insult and more like a prayer. I have hated you since the day you walked into this school with your sketchbook and your cheap shoes and your eyes that look at everything like you're judging the soul of the world. The feeling is mutual, I retorted, though my breath hitched as his knee pressed between mine, a dominant, claiming gesture that sent a jolt of electricity up my spine. We stood there in the silence for what felt like hours. The sirens outside had stopped, replaced by an oppressive quiet that was somehow worse. The air in the closet was getting thinner, hotter. The oxygen was depleting, replaced by the carbon dioxide of our harsh breathing and the thick, heavy tension of 3 years of unspoken obsession. My legs began to cramp. I shifted, trying to alleviate the pressure, but the movement caused my hip to brush against his groin. Silas hissed, his head snapping down. Stop moving. I can't, I gasped, the heat becoming unbearable. It's too tight. I can't breathe, Silas. Focus on me, he ordered. His hand, the one that had silenced me, moved up to grip my jaw. His fingers were long, calloused from rowing, and possessive. Don't you dare pass out on me, Vane. Look at me. I hate you. I repeated, but the words lacked their bite. They sounded wet, desperate. Good, Silas murmured, his face inching closer. Hate keeps you alive. Hate burns. Use it. He was staring at my mouth. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The bullying. The constant torment. The way he would knock my books out of my hands only to watch me pick them up. The way he would corner me at parties to mock my clothes, standing just a little too close, his gaze lingering a little too long. It wasn't just hatred. It was a twisted, malformed desire that he didn't know how to process. He was a thorn, taught to conquer, to own, to break. He didn't know how to want something he couldn't simply buy. You don't hate me, I whispered, a dangerous gamble. You're obsessed with me. Silas froze. The air in the closet seemed to vibrate. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me. His grip on my jaw tightened to the point of pain. You think you're so smart, he growled, his voice dropping an octave, turning into a rumble that I felt in my chest. You think you have me figured out? You think because you're poor and noble and talented that you understand the world? I understand that you're trembling, I challenged, looking straight into his dark eyes. And it's not because of the gunman outside. Silas let out a fractured sound, half laugh, half growl. You have no idea what you're playing with, Julian. No idea what I've done to keep you here. To keep you safe. Safe. I scoffed incredulously. You got me fired from the library job. You turned the student council against me. You poured red wine on my final architectural model the night before the showcase. That model was flawed structurally, Silas spat back, his defense instant and bizarrely specific. The support beams were too thin for the cantilever. If you had presented that, the visiting dean would have laughed you out of the program. I destroyed it, so you had to use your backup design. The one that won you the internship. I stared at him, my mouth falling open. The backup design, a simple, brutalist structure I had thrown together in tears at 4 a.m., had won. I had assumed it was pity. You destroyed it to help me. I destroyed it because I demand excellence, Silas corrected sharply, though his eyes darted away for the first time. And because if you failed, you would have lost your scholarship and left. And he trailed off. The silence stretched, heavy and laden with the truth he refused to speak. And you what? I pushed, my hands moving up to grip the lapels of his bespoke blazer. Silas looked back at me, and the mask of the arrogant bully crumbled, revealing a terrifying hunger. And I am not finished with you yet. The tension snapped. It wasn't a romantic embrace. It was a collision. Silas surged forward, crashing his mouth onto mine with a desperation that bordered on violence. It was a kiss of teeth and tongue and pent-up rage, a chaotic release of 3 years of repressed energy. I should have pushed him away. I should have kneed him and screamed. But my body betrayed me instantly. I opened to him, my hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. The taste of him was intoxicating, coffee, mint, and the darkness of his own soul. He groaned into my mouth, his hands sliding down my back to grip my waist, lifting me slightly, so I was pressed entirely against him. The friction was maddening. In the dark, cramped closet, with death potentially waiting outside the door, the only thing that mattered was this fire between us. Silas, I gasped, breaking the kiss for air. This is insane. We're enemies. We're past that, he muttered against my neck, biting down on the sensitive cord of muscle there. We were never enemies, Julian. I was just a coward, and you were too blind to see I was trying to get your attention the only way I knew how. By tormenting me? By making sure you never looked at anyone else, he confessed, the admission dark and possessive. He pulled back to look at me, his thumb tracing my swollen lower lip. Every time you smiled at that waiter, I got him fired. Every time you studied with that transfer student, I made sure he transferred out. You are mine, Vane. You have been mine since freshman orientation. It was toxic. It was horrifying. And God help me, it was the most thrilling thing I had ever heard. You're a monster, I whispered, leaning into his touch. I know, Silas agreed, his eyes burning. But I'm your monster. And once we get out of here, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making up for the wine. And the library job. And every tear you cried because of me. You think I'm going to forgive you that easily? Silas smirked, the arrogance returning, but softened by a new warmth. I think you like the chase, Julian. I think you like the challenge. And I have enough money and time to grovel until you cave. Before I could respond, the closet door jerked. We froze, bodies locked together. Clear. Room 304 is clear, a voice shouted from the hallway. The police. The lockdown was over. The reality of the world was about to come crashing back in. Silas pulled away slightly, straightening his blazer, his mask of indifference sliding back into place, but not before he grabbed my hand and squeezed it hard. Wait, he commanded softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief, gently wiping the saliva from my lip. We walk out separately. Meet me at the east gate in an hour. My driver will take us to my penthouse. I have a dorm, I argued weakly. Not anymore, Silas said, opening the door and flooding the closet with blinding light. He looked back at me, silhouetted against the brightness, looking like a fallen angel. The game has changed, Julian. No more shadows. No more closets. You're coming into my world. He stepped out, barking orders at the police chief as if he owned the force, demanding to know why the security response time was so slow. I stayed in the shadows for a moment longer, touching my bruised lips, my heart racing. The bully who had made my life a living hell had just saved it. And in the darkness, he had given me the key to his own destruction. I stepped out into the light, smoothing my shirt. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the only person who knew the truth about Silas Thorne. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of the narrative, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a bully if you found out their cruelty was a twisted form of protection? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,